You all received his CV, so I'm skipping some of the points, but Dr. Yossi Beilin was the spokesman of the Labour Party and then was the secretary of the government in the mid-80s. Very important because the two important things happened then. One, pull-out or partial pull-out from Lebanon and recovery from the terrible economic situation. And Dr. Beilin was instrumental in this. Then was elected to the Knesset in the Labour Party. And between 92 and 95, he served as the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. And this is the time of Oslo, which was a brainchild, I believe, of Dr. Beilin. And then he was Minister of Economics, and then later, I think under in the government of Barak, you were the Justice Minister, among other things. And then Meretz Party in 2008, you said enough is enough. There's life after politics, we'll hear. The initial idea was to talk about the UN resolution and Kerry's speech and the coming Paris conference, but as usual in Israel, things happen. So we had the Laura Zarga thing with the aftermath, etc. So I think we'll take the opportunity to ask Dr. Beilin for you to say a couple of things about challenges and opportunities in the international arena, but I'm sure people will also be interested in your thoughts about other issues. So without further ado, Dr. Beilin, please. No, sure.
Thank you very much. Of course, such terrorist attacks are always putting you in another proportion. When you see how soldiers who went for a kind of a seminar today were attacked by these cars, which the trucks, which are attacking us in France, in other places. You never know the next weapon. I mean, on the one hand, it's so smart and that you can't understand what it is at all, and on the other hand, it is so foolish and primitive, like knives and cars, that makes it difficult to find the right tactical answers. Although there are answers, of course, and usually they are given even if it takes time. Now, speaking about the Paris conference and what happened with Obama and Kerry, I think that all of them are actually an expression of frustration. If you ask, is it so important? What was the Paris conference of June 16? Who remembers? Who remembers the communique? If you read it, I'm sure you read it. It's really, how should I say diplomatically, insignificant. Then you had the resolution in the UN on the settlements. That was significant. Again, not for tomorrow, but as part of the general point of reference for the future. There were some important things there. A kind of an effort to balance the resolution. But of course, there were two main lessons for us. And here I'm not renewing anything for you. One is the big gap between the intimate talks with other leaders in the back rooms and their official positions, which count. Not that I am dismissing the importance of discussions in intimate talks, because in many events it is conducive to practical results. Even military, semi-military. But it gives you as a decision maker the wrong feeling that you are on top of things. That you may just take the phone and call your official enemy and say, hey, Chaim, let's do something in Egypt. And he said, oh, no problem, just tell me why. But these are not the real relations. And then when the moment of truth in a way comes, and these people have to say what they really think about our politics, and this is not something new. They are telling us the usual policy. They are giving us the usual song. From France to Britain to other countries. It's not anti-Israeli, for sure. They're not anti-Israeli. But this is their policy, and we knew their policy about this issue. And there are many Israelis who feel the same about the issue of settlements, not necessarily in the same wording or whatever, but generally speaking. I think that the main importance of the UN resolution is not its content, but the number of voters and the countries which voted, which told our politicians not to be too smug about it, not to think that by having close relationships with other leaders in the world, not to think that because there are much bigger problems than the Israeli-Palestinian one, either the refugees or even the settlements, then people actually are ready to forgive, to forget, and to go forward. It won't help us. And from this point, I think that the decision of the Americans to abstain, although it's important, is secondary. What is important is that the other 15 voted as they did. They are not enemies of Israel. It means something for us. It should mean something for the decision makers. As to the abstention of the Americans, this was part of, I think, Obama's personal frustration from his inability to move things on the ground, and mainly the failure, the American failure, in the 2 months of negotiations, 2013, 2014. It will be very difficult to have a very significant resolution on January 15 in Paris. Very difficult, because here the French are gathering dozens of foreign ministers who do not agree with each other. And the resolution might be again like the one in June, and it will not have a real impact. This is my feeling right now. The attempt is to take the Kerry's speech and to make out of it a resolution to the UN to be voted before the 20th of January. This is the French attempt. I don't believe that it will be as easy to have a consensus around the 6 points of Kerry in Paris. And even if there is such a miracle for the French, I'm not sure whether America will abstain again. So it's two ifs which make it a little too difficult to believe that it will take place. What does it say to us, this French attempt, which was quite strange for many of us? I mean, how come out of the blue? And between us, there is the EU. It has a foreign affairs high commissioner. I mean, what high representative? Why the French have to convene the world to have a resolution? So I think that it is again the kind of frustration. We cannot move anything. The two-state solution is vanishing. We tried for many years to do something. Israel, the Palestinians are not playing the role we expected them to play. And as a result of it, we have to do something, at least to show that we are still interested in solving the problem. It's a sign, but not much more than that. Now about the coming weeks. We are facing the unknown, the total unknown. I visited Washington a few days ago, and nobody is even trying to foresee anything. Even the wisest pundits are saying, please, Yossi, don't ask me what I think will happen. I have no idea. Some of them are saying, and he has no idea. Some of them are saying, you know, maybe it is a new page, something totally new, with billionaires, businessmen, chairman of a board of directors, who are having very different views about how to solve problems. They hate the nitty-gritty issues and differences. They want to solve the problems. They know how to solve the problems. They say, what's your view? What is your view? Maybe we can find the common denominator. So let us not reject in advance a new attitude, which I personally tend to accept, mainly because I don't have any other option. Now, and I'm seeing what the president-elect is saying now about Russia and its involvement, what he said before, what he said about the report, what does he say now about what he read, and is more, I would say, careful. Speaks about the importance of the people who wrote it, he trusts them, whatever. But apparently, if you see the American press of today, even those who read the report cannot say that it is 100% that it was done by Putin or something like that. They can explain why Putin would have done it, had he done it. Kind of revenge against the Americans of some cases in the last years, that he could do that, but there is no very clear evidence, which allows Trump to say, I'm far from being sure, even though at least the CIA is very sure about it, the NSA a little bit less, and it's a very weird situation. Very weird situation. If something like that happened, you pray that it did not. The unbearable ease of being involved in the elections in the United States by Russia, I mean, it would have been a very bizarre movie. So, what is left for somebody like me, who is usually an optimist and would like always to find a way how to use the current situation in order to promote the idea of peace? I'm saying, let's imagine that Donald Trump is really a very good friend of Israel. Which kind of Israel? This is always another question. But generally, I mean, there are people whom I know, regretfully, who really hate Israel. Not many of them that I met in the political arena. But sometimes you see that they don't distinguish between us. Moderates, extremists, you are all as if the big mistake was to come here. So Donald Trump is somebody who believes in the cause of Israel. He is surrounded by people who are to the right of Netanyahu. At least on the question of the two-state solution. So he's asking himself, what could I do in order to further the needs of Israel? How could I do good things for Israel? If this is the case, we really don't know. But if this is the case, so
moving the embassy is one.
Moving the embassy is one. No, it is so obvious, and since everybody said it before him almost, he fell into it again in an unbearable ease. Every president is speaking about the embassy in Jerusalem, so he repeated it. He may be serious about it more than others, but he felt that he had to say the same thing. Now, this is not very simple. And you know, I remember what happened in '95. When the Congress decided to take this decision. On the one hand, we could not be happier. We were in government. It was never taken before the Oslo Agreement. So in a way, it was on the basis of Oslo that people in the Congress decided to go for it. I talked about it with the Prime Minister, with Rabin. And, he was a famous pro-Jerusalemite. And he said, Yossi, I mean, I couldn't get a nicer gift. On the other hand, it might be an explosive one. We didn't know then, to be frank, and we don't know today. Exactly as we can say, or if you see the articles which have been published lately about it, by Martin Indyk and others. There might be, God forbid, another war with the whole Muslim world and from Indonesia, I don't know where, and it might be relatively very silent reaction. It is not that we know in advance. We know only one thing, that it will put some of the Arab leaders about whom we care in a very, very inconvenient situation. If you saw what Abu Mazen said the other day, he said, it will stop everything as if there is something to stop, and we will not use force because this is not our way, but we have in our arsenal a lot of tools to react. Okay. What is it going to do to Sisi? You see what we did to Sisi the other a few weeks ago, when we convinced him directly or indirectly to take off the table the Egyptian resolution to the UN. He did it, and then it was put by another one, and he had to put it. So, to vote for it. So he both was criticized by the Arab world for taking it off, by us for voting for it. You couldn't do a nicer thing to a friend. Really. Just think about what went in his mind in these last weeks. So we would like, of course, to see the embassy here, and I'm sure that we will see the embassy here. But the question is whether it can be, it may take place in a kind of a unilateral action that America decides, well, from next Wednesday you have an embassy here, or even move the office of the ambassador to the Agron Street. Or that it should be in a context of an agreement with the Palestinians, which was our original idea. Now, I don't want to stand in the street and to ask Trump not to do that. But I think that he already got some advice about it. And that, which means you are opening here a Pandora's box, which might be very dangerous. The question is whether it is worthwhile. What does Israel get out of it? Besides the fulfilling of a wish, which is a kind of a very wide Israeli consensus. So, if he asks me, I would say, think seriously about a security alliance, a defense alliance with Israel. I'm thinking about it for many years. America has dozens of security or alliances with other countries in the world. It doesn't have one with Israel. It has many MOUs and whatever with Israel. It doesn't have a defense alliance with Israel. Not only because of the United States, by the way, but in the past, when there were some efforts to promote this idea, apparently, the Americans could not accept the Israeli conditions for the alliance. And as a result of it, the decision was to wait with this idea for the future. I think that this is something which is tangible, and that effort should be done in this direction. It will not happen in one day. This is a project. It is not a decision to move the embassy. This is a project. You have to negotiate. You have to sit together, to have different groups which will deal with different security aspects in order to achieve something like this. And in my view, it is it is more important for Israel. Speaking about the peace idea, I'm trying to understand from him, from what he says here and there, what he means. First, he said about being neutral in negotiations, which was interesting, mainly because this was the kind of a litmus test. If anybody would say, I'm neutral in the negotiations, it meant that he was pro-Arab. For us, he was pro-Arab. How can one be neutral in such a crisis, in such a conflict? So when he said so, it was not received the same way. And he also immediately explained himself quite reasonably that if you really want to mediate, you have to be neutral. By the way, I'm not sure about it. I really am not sure whether a mediator must be neutral. What is important is that both sides will know what are his or her views. But once you know the views, then the mediator can be more supportive on one side. But okay, this is a marginal question. So, he then said that Israel has to pay for its defense expenses. It was not by his own idea, he spoke about other countries, then somebody provoked him and said, what about Israel? And he didn't have enough time to think, and he said, yes, of course, of Israel too. Because it was done in such circumstances, apparently, and because of knowing his support for Israel, there were no demonstrations in Israel against something like that, if I'm not mistaken. So he got away with it. Then he said, after being elected, that he wants to solve the Israeli-Palestinian problem because this is the big project. And he is challenged by big projects, so he wants to do that. And he knows, generally speaking, how, because he will look at it as a kind of a business problem. Now, we can all say, what does he know about it? He doesn't know the details. He doesn't know the history. He doesn't know even the people involved. He did not meet with them. Like he never met with Putin, the big friends, Never met with him. He is an outsider. And as an outsider businessman, he didn't have to meet with Abu Mazen or with, I don't know who. But maybe such a new attitude can be fruitful. So I would say the following. Think about the idea of a confederation, of an Israeli-Palestinian confederation. It has never thoroughly tested. There are so many problems which could not be resolved in prior official negotiations that perhaps can be solved if it is in the context of a confederation. Although in the informal negotiations like the Geneva Initiative, we could find solutions for these problems. But these were not official negotiations. So one big problem is that any prime minister will have to deal with the problem of evacuating hundreds of thousands of settlers from the West Bank. Who wants to do that? A leftist, a rightist, to confront such a problem? And I'm not speaking about the feasibility of the evacuation. Let's imagine that Israel is a strong democracy, and if it takes such a decision, it can implement it. Still, it is very, very, very difficult. Another question is the question of the Palestinian refugees. People are saying even a small number of Palestinian new citizens is impossible. Because in a way, you accept the right of return, which Israel never accepted. And rightly. And then you have the issue of security, which in my view is the most important issue here. When we negotiated with the Palestinians, 20, 22, 23 years ago, what was the main security problem? It was the Eastern Front. They didn't have peace with Jordan. Iraq was a big threat. So we said, no, we want to have a non-militarized state in Palestine, and we can then have early warning systems on the hills, so when the Iraqi or the Jordanian armies are coming, we will be able to attack them before they attack us. It is a little bit primitive what I'm saying and simplified, but this was the main issue in our view. We didn't want the Palestinians to be weaponized with planes and tanks and whatever. And we had to defend ourselves from the east. This is yesterday news. This is yesterday news. Now, what can, if today, speaking about security, we achieve everything. We have peace with the Palestinians, we have a wonderful partner, and even we ourselves are wonderful. And there is an agreement. And the Palestinians don't argue with us about the non-militarized state. What is going to happen is that the West Bank will become a not non-militarized, but non-protected place. And the new enemies are ISIS and Shmisis and whatever. Early warning systems against them is quite problematic. They are acting differently, and they are searching the weakest places in this part of the world. We are, in a way, going to have an agreement and invite them in. Now I'm asking myself, what can be the answer? It should never be, okay, if this is the case, let's wait for another 50 years and maybe then we solve it.
Short one. A short answer. Because we want to give them.
Yeah. The answer is that if we decide to have a confederation, which is a poetic name, you don't have too many of them in the world. But it is a framework for sovereign and independent states, which work together and share part of the common areas. It doesn't mean neither a joint leader or a joint government or a joint parliament or something like this. Now, when you have a confederation, which means that there will be more proximity between the two parties, you can prevent any evacuation of settlements in the West Bank, and say whoever wants to be a Palestinian inhabitant and an Israeli citizen may have this right. To the Palestinians, you may say that once we know more or less the number of settlers who prefer to remain in the Palestinian state after our evacuation, military evacuation, we might have more or less the same quota for Palestinians who have a Palestinian citizenship but an Israeli residence, which might solve in many ways the idea of the Palestinian dreams and whatever. And about the security, which again in my view is the most important and relevant part, I think that as part of the division of labor in this confederation, the internal security should be totally in the hands of the Palestinians on the West Bank, but Israel will take upon itself the security for the confederation. I don't want to continue here. Personally, I'm working on it to try and see the details, the precedents, the weak points of this proposal, to listen to critiques of this proposal, and to promote it as much as I can. What I would say is that this can be an idea for the new American administration to deal with our conflict, not exactly from the place when the previous one left it.
Thank you. Now drink your tea before it gets... Okay, let's open up for questions. Yes?
Dr. Beilin, your idea for confederation was actually proposed in 1986 by then Australian Prime Minister Bob Hawke, and he wanted to include Jordan. What do you feel about that?
Actually, it was in a way mentioned in 1949 in the partition resolution. The idea of the partition resolution
47.
about economic cooperation between the two states, and a lot of references to something which looks like a confederation. If you read it today, you see that those who wrote the resolution thought about a kind of a confederation. And since then it was raised by many, and Jordan was part of it. But what I can tell you is the following thing. In my view, having Jordan as part of the confederation may be possible, but the confederation with the Palestinians seems to me now needed in order to have the two-state solution. I see the confederation as the way to implement it. This is not the case with Jordan. When we speak about Jordan, we can speak about a larger group of states which work together in a context of ASEAN, not to speak about the EU or something like this. With the Palestinians, it should be the hard core of such a confederation.
Yes, please.
Oh, I'll ask another question then.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, this one has something to do with your previous role as a Minister of Justice. I think there's a lot of confusion about what will happen if Prime Minister Netanyahu has to step down. What happens in terms of whether we go to elections or we don't go to elections, and whether there are better chances for peace process to be resumed or worse chances? What happens?
First of all, in order for him to decide to end his own term, to resign, he needs much more than just an indictment. And he can go to a trial, he can be there until the end of it, and only if he is found guilty, then he has to resign, which is really a long process. This is the words of the law. Since the law was written, there was an adjudication by the Supreme Court that a minister who is indicted has to resign. So it might be, if this is the case, a big question. If a minister has to resign, why not the prime minister? But still, it won't be, if he decides to stay, he might stay there. As to the ramifications, the political ramifications, it is very hard to know who might be there to replace him, whether there is a chance for a center-left government to replace this government. I think that it is quite premature.
Yes, please.
Dr. Beilin, could you maybe give us your ideas about Israel's relation with the Arab world right now? The Prime Minister says that it is improving, but we don't see it. What are your views about it? And secondly, also about the confederation, yes? How do you see the mood in the Palestinian street about this idea and
about what?
About the confederation and about also among Palestinian politicians? That's my second question.
We just hosted Khalil Shkaki, who's the Palestinian pollster, and he said the majority of Palestinians don't believe that this is going anywhere.
Yeah, but it means nothing. It means majority of Israelis don't believe that it goes anywhere. So what? But the same statisticians are saying that there are majorities for a two-state solution. So if there is a leader who brings the idea on the table, puts it on the table, and says, "I actually am fulfilling the security needs of Israel, and we are going to have a two-state solution," we know by now, and this is the asset that we are having from the surveys, that there are majorities to support them. The fact that people are frustrated is neither new nor conducive to any decision. They don't believe that it may happen. I mean, we tried many times, and it didn't succeed, so it won't succeed. But they don't say that if it happens, they will be against now because it didn't succeed in the past. And as long as their conclusion is not negative about the future, then their mood is maybe important, but not for the decision makers so much. About the idea of confederation, first of all, it is a non-issue. It is not something that people are debating about. There is a group in Israel which speaks about one country, two peoples. So there are, and again, as I said to you, it is not something new. The new thing about it is the effort to make out of it something very coherent, not the general idea of having a joint framework. There was a very interesting a research or a long world of, no, not proposal, I mean, it is Professor Sari Nusseibeh, who is the former head of the Al-Quds University, and for a short time he was even the minister for Jerusalem in the Palestinian Authority, and a very thoughtful person. I'm sure that some of you know him. He wrote a very long article in the Foreign Affairs 2.5 years ago, supporting the idea of an Israeli-Palestinian confederation. Speaking to Palestinians, I mean, I hate to say that I talk to Palestinians who were positive about it, because you can meet whoever you want. And people are saying to you, I'm positive. It doesn't mean that there is a support. I never saw any polls speaking about a confederation. Some of the Palestinians I talked to were not enthusiastic about it. Some of the Palestinians that I talked to were very supportive of it. And personally, I'm not going to do something like putting it on the table as a book, as a very detailed book about what does it mean. There are so many questions, so many questions. Before I'm sure that there is a Palestinian partner who is significant enough in order to present it with him or her. Otherwise, I never did things like that unilaterally as another Israeli idea. There are so many Israeli ideas which are hovering in our world. And so what? I mean, if you don't have a partner, even an informal one, but a partner who says, from the Palestinian point of view, it is worthwhile, then don't do it. Now, about the relationship with the Arab countries, I'm very glad that we have today better relationships with the Arab countries than 5, 6, 7 years ago. But we know exactly that it is both because of the agreement with Iran, which many of them saw as a big mistake, and were angry with Obama. And then they said to themselves what we always say: it is better for us even to cooperate with our bad neighbors than with somebody who lives so far from us. This was one thing. And another was ISIS. The need for the Arab world to defend itself from the lunatics of the Arab world or the Muslim world. Now, we know that frustration and need to defend and hatred, all these things are not the worst components of friendship. You can build coalitions on this basis. But as I said before, something is missing. And I think that Netanyahu personally and people around him are deceiving themselves, thinking that what they have are good relations with the Arab peoples, and that these people understand exactly who the Palestinians are. They are not pushing us to have an agreement with them, even telling us that, we understand exactly whom you are dealing with. And as a result of it, we don't have to rush to have an agreement with the Palestinians, and we can be satisfied with the current level of friendship with the Arab world. And this is nonsense. Nonsense.
So if you were Prime Minister today, what would you do?
Which Prime Minister?
Prime Minister.
I'll tell you, because it depends where you put me in the game. If you put me in the place of Netanyahu,
okay,
not with my ideology, with his one.
Not with the family things.
I would go with all my force to the second phase of the roadmap, namely negotiations of a Palestinian state with provisional borders. Something which the Likud-led Israeli government agreed to 13 years ago or 14 years ago. The Palestinians agreed to. You don't have to deal neither with Jerusalem nor with the refugees.
Only borders.
Only provisional borders. So what you can do now let's say you are a rightist, right Netanyahu, but not like the Jewish home. And you want to do something, but you are not ready to pay the whole price, which in my view is his case. I would say, let us first of all have a Palestinian state. We cannot allow it, we cannot afford it to wait until we become a minority to the west of the Jordan River. We cannot. I mean, in Zionist view, you cannot allow it, whether you are from the right or from the left. So, and the question of whether there is no chance for a two-state solution and only one-state solution, which means the end of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state, is something that he should be worried about as the prime minister, to leave this legacy. It is a question of few years now. So imagine that he says, I'm not going to anything which is crazy. Israel already accepted it. It became a UN Security Council resolution. Let's go for it. We will negotiate on provisional borders. There will be a full sovereign Palestinian independent state. Sorry. On the other very thorny issues we will negotiate in the future, the two governments will immediately engage themselves in negotiations on the full permanent agreement, but they will have time, like 5 years, to get there. So he gains time, which is always his game. He wants to gain time, but not by doing nothing in the meantime, but by having a Palestinian state. Yes, something which is so, in my view, it is mind-boggling, that it is so obvious. It's not a leftist idea, it is nothing. Go for it.
But it takes two to tango. You think there's a Palestinian partner for this?
You know, I'm very, very careful not to speak on their behalf. There are those who say, who put conditions for such a game. I talked about it a lot with Abu Mazen. And Abu Mazen said, I know the Israelis. Any interim will become a permanent. My answer to him was, you have an interim which has been which became a permanent for 23 years. Have a better one. Have a state, at least. He said, in order to go for something which is gradual, he calls it a gradual, not an interim, I need a full vision for the permanent, and I need a timetable. I believe that these two things can be given to him. But you know what? Imagine that Abu Mazen doesn't want it. You, as the Israeli prime minister, initiate something. You are so many years there. You didn't initiate anything. You are speaking about your readiness to surprise the world. You say that you don't want a binational state. You want a two-state solution. Why don't you suggest something? Because you are afraid that whatever you suggest may endanger the support of somebody in your coalition? This is not a good enough reason. This is a risk that you can take because you know that in the Knesset you will always have a coalition, another coalition, to support it. So this is half of the answer. This is if I'm Netanyahu, I will do it immediately. If I am the prime minister, I would use the existence of Abu Mazen there as a president, because he is the kind of the counterpart. We wanted, when Arafat was there unshaved, and we prayed for somebody who denounces violence and who is shaved. The guy is committed to peace. He cannot deliver what we exactly want, because he cannot deliver Gaza. He cannot deliver Hamas. I would go for the following thing. I would try and have a full-fledged, a permanent agreement with Abu Mazen, preferably on the basis of a confederation. And I would try to have a Hunda, a long-range ceasefire with Hamas in parallel.
Okay, I don't know if we're going to see you as Prime Minister, but
No.
But if we do, remember it started here. Okay, Dr. Beilin, I want to thank you and give you a membership card of our press club.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming, and thank you for coming. אתה מקבל פה 20% הנחה במסעדה.